So a while back, someone told me that I just needed to read more. That's the true path to getting better at Japanese. And so of course, I went to the library, bought the first book I could find, and opened it. And man, I struggled. No matter how many dictionary lookups I did or trying to break apart these sentences, I was completely lost. There are a lot of good videos already that show you how to pick good content, but today I want to explicitly cover things that I've read that have helped me throughout my Japanese journey. There's three things that I like to keep in mind when balancing out and picking my reading materials. One is going to be interest, right? Most importantly. Just because a book is easy to read doesn't mean that it's going to be inherently interesting to you. I apologize in advance to any med school students here, but if someone were to hypothetically write a medical book in Japanese that was super duper easy to read, I don't think I'd find that as interesting as some mystery or horror stories. The second thing I like to focus on when it comes to balance is difficulty. If you always stick with reading materials at the same difficulty, you're never going to push yourself to grow. I like to think about it like working out at the gym. You may have some guy who goes in and lifts the same weight every day, but if you never add more weight to it, you're not going to get bigger, you're not going to get stronger. So bit by bit, you need to push yourself and kind of get out of your comfort zone, which also falls into the third thing I keep in mind, which is comprehension. Now for comprehension, you're going to see a lot of people throwing around percentages, right? You need to know 80%, 85, 90. Some people even say 98% comprehension is optimal. But for me, I don't really think there's an exact number. Anything above maybe 70 to 80% is enough for you to have the reading experience be relatively enjoyable. As a quick example, let me show you what each of these comprehension levels feel like. You live and work in Tokyo. Tokyo is a big city. More than 13 million people live around you. You're never boregal, but you are always lonely. Every morning, you get up and take the train to work, and every night, you take the train again to go home. The train is always crowded. When people ask about your work, you tell them, I move papers around. It's a joke, but it's also true. You don't like your work. Tonight, you're returning home. It's late at night. No one is schnooling. Sometimes you don't see a schnool all day. You are tired. You are so tired. Bingle for help, you shout. The loopity is dying. You put your fingers on her neck. Nothing. Her flit is not weefling. You take out your jupil and bingle 119, the emergency number in Japan. There's no answer. Then you muchi that you have a new before an assengle. It's from your gut ring, Evie. She hunrers at Tokyo University. You play the assengle. If you get this, Evie says. I can't vicar now. The important passage is. Suddenly, she looks around. Dingle. Oh no, they're here. Crippet, the frib. Waspel them. On the frib. Beep. The assengle parentales. Then you gratoon something behind you. So imagine for each of those gibberish words, you're opening your dictionary or doing a pop-up and looking up the word and maybe making a flashcard. Just something to keep in mind while picking out materials. So at the beginner stages, I found myself mainly focused on building up confidence and consistency, and part of that also came with building up vocabulary. Now if you're starting from zero and you do want some form of structured study, I highly recommend Genki I and II. Not only does it teach you vocabulary, grammar, and sentence structure, but there are also conversations and reading passages in there featuring vocabulary from each chapter, so it reinforces what you learn. There's even Anki decks online that go along with this textbook. Now I already know I'm going to get some comments saying, hey, you don't actually need to study grammar, you can just do that through immersion. Now if you still want to do the textbooks but speedrun them, then you can go to websites like Taikim's Grammar or Sakubi and just scroll through those, get a general idea of how Japanese grammar and sentence structure works. I'd still recommend building up your vocabulary either through the textbook or a core 1K, 2K deck, and after that, use the reading sections in the textbooks to figure out how words work, how the sentence structure, and how Japanese sentences actually fit together. Now for those beginner stages, I recommend high feedback content, starting with graded readers. And graded readers are just books that are written and adapted for language learners at increasingly difficult levels. My two recommendations for accessing graded readers for free are going to be NPO Tadoku supporters, as well as White Rabbit Press. Those are the ones I mainly use when getting into my reading journey. After getting past that N5 to N4 territory, I started to get into NHK Easy. This is another one of my personal favorites because it takes articles written for native Japanese adults and rewrites them for Japanese middle schoolers and people learning the language. I know a lot of people are going to be itching to get into that native shonen and shoujo content such as manga, so my recommendations is to find manga with furigana. Now a fan favorite among Japanese learners when starting their manga reading journey is Yotsubato. It's a wholesome slice of life manga, and the website Living Japanese actually has a really solid free reading pack to go along with Yotsubato. The reading pack itself is actually an Anki deck that has all the vocabulary and sentences from the first volume, so this reading pack makes Yotsubato and the general transition into reading manga way more easier and manageable, regardless of if you start grinding it before you pop open the manga or even while you're reading it. Before moving on, one thing I really struggled with as a beginner was too much motivation. What I mean by that is I'd sit down to study or read and I would go at it for 5 to 6 hours. As I'm sitting here today, I'm able to enjoy most native content to an extent, but I could still not imagine immersing for 5 to 6 plus hours. I try to set aside time and have short, consistent reading sessions, and if I did find myself overflowing with any extra excitement, I would use that and put that energy into reading the next day. The more consistent you are, the better you're going to get at Japanese, and the better you get at Japanese, the more complex the reading material is going to get for you, which brings me into the intermediate stage. Now during these stages, I found myself focusing a bit more on managing difficulty, as we touched on towards the beginning of this video. Now towards the beginning of my intermediate journey, I found that slice of life manga had become way more approachable, and as a benchmark, I was finding about 1 to 2 unknown words in every NHK Easy article. This may sound a little bit off topic at first, but I sat down and took a second to think, well, what are my hobbies? What am I interested in? Now, first of all, the reason I did this is that I love talking about these hobbies in English, and eventually, I'm probably going to want to talk about them in Japanese as well. So for me, some of my favorite hobbies are actually weightlifting and cooking, and I even developed a third hobby, which is why do words work like this in Japanese? For my cooking recipes I was doing at home, I slowly started transitioning to them in Japanese and started following along with those. Same thing with my workout sets. I even started watching a weightlifting anime and a cooking anime. I'm not going to say which ones, but if you know, you know. Anyways, if I ever had any weird questions about Japanese kanji, such as why all of these are read as itoko, what they mean and when they shouldn't be read as itoko, or when to read this as kei or ikisatsu, etc., I would just Google it in Japanese and read blog articles by natives on why Japanese worked the way it did, and I found it really fascinating. Through this, I was able to pick up more and more vocabulary relevant to my interests, and I found that translated really well to watching content that was actually within my sphere of enjoyment. Things that I actually found interesting and I would choose to watch myself if I understood Japanese. So at this stage, I was really just focused on transitioning my life to Japanese as much as I could, bit by bit, and a huge part of that was just grinding out tons of slice of life manga. Some recommendations for me are Chihayafuru as well as Miroko-chan. And I don't have physical copies of these other two, but Komi-san wa komishou desu, or Komi-san can't communicate, as well as Seihantai na kimi to boku, or You and I are polar opposites. Now the reason I recommend these two books are that they are still slice of life, but this one has some haunted, ghostly undertones, and this one has a lot of karuta, so you get to learn some of that specialized vocabulary. These books contain a lot of everyday vocabulary, so they're really approachable, but you do get a little bit more, which can help you expand into genres down the line. I read a ton of these, and I found that JJK and Dandadan were actually quite approachable.
Nice team!
Now at this point, you'll probably also find yourself wanting to get into reading ranobe, or Japanese light novels. Now if you've done some research on what the best light novel is to start out with, you've probably seen this book. Now for those of you wanting a JLPT level associated with this, I'd probably put it around N3 or slightly above. It was pretty enjoyable for me, and even though I had to do a decent amount of looking up at the beginning, I still found it quite approachable. Now if you do end up reading this novel and you like the author's writing style, Sumi no Yoru, he has another book called Kimi no Suizo tabetai, or I Want to Eat Your Pancreas. Kind of a weird title, but trust me, it's super good. Another book I found really enjoyable is Konbini Ningen, or Convenience Store Woman. It's also popular among Japanese learners trying to get into reading light novels. Another really great medium for reading Japanese are visual novels. These are games with text, images, and sometimes voice actors reading the lines aloud. I found that this is a much more entertaining form of reading Japanese, and my mental stamina can handle it for a lot longer than just sitting down and reading a book. Now you're going to be finding a ton of new words here, and that's totally fine. You're not failing, you're actually building stamina. I like to think of each Japanese word as sort of a tool in my toolbox or tool house, and with each word or kanji I collect, I'm more equipped for all sorts of social situations. Now I get it, around this stage, a lot of people, myself included, are gonna have to stop every few seconds to look up words. When you're reading in Japanese and you have to pause that often, it totally kills your flow. I've had times where I've actually started off really strong, but after 10 minutes of copy pasting into Google Translate or just switching tabs in general, my brain just gives up. And it may not even be that the material's too hard, but rather that all those little pauses break your focus and wear you down. And that's why I use Migaku. It basically turns any web page, subtitle file, or even pictures of your books into a fully interactive reading environment. I can hover over a word, instantly see the meaning, and if I want to remember it, just click to save it. It automatically syncs to Anki, so the words I encounter while reading become part of my study deck without any extra effort. It's honestly the easiest way I've found to make hard reading material feel approachable, because you're staying in Japanese, not jumping back and forth between tabs or dictionaries. You're still going to get tired when reading difficult stuff, that's completely normal, but with tools like Migaku, you can stay immersed for way longer before that fatigue hits. It's not about avoiding hard material, it's about making it more manageable. Once you've got that rhythm going, you'll be amazed at how quickly advanced material can start to feel doable. If this sounds interesting to you, you can get an extra month for free on me when you go to migaku.com/jareddesu. They're also offering 10% off the lifetime plan. But yeah, once you've built that flow, even advanced stuff becomes way more approachable. Now during this stage, I've been trying to further develop my long-term reading stamina through things like Tadoku, as well as getting an eye for the different writing styles between authors. You may also find yourself wanting to read essays or even news articles from the actual NHK website. At this level, there's a ton of approachable media to choose from, so it's really rinsing and repeating and slowly pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. The choices that you make are going to be more aligned with your personal interests and hobbies. First off, as I mentioned for articles, transitioning from NHK Easy over into the actual NHK website and choosing articles that seem interesting. For example, I've recently read some articles about bear attacks in Hokkaido. So through binge reading that whole string of articles, I've actually picked up quite a few words related to nature, habitats, and ecosystems, and I found that through time, reading those sort of articles have become easier. Now, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. I haven't gone into reading any Japanese essays yet, unless you count the JLPT N2 reading sections. But I found that with Japanese books, I am a murder mystery nerd. So my first recommendation is the Hennaiie series. I finished the first book probably a month ago, and I've started the second one, and I love the writing style. You learn a lot of words about architecture if that's interesting, and there's some plot twists in there. Overall, a really good read. I've also started the translation of the very famous book Murder on the Oriental Express, or Oriental Kyuko no Satsujin. Really good read so far. Another one that I'm excited to get started on reading is Shike ni Itaru Yamai. It's about a college student who gets a letter from a convicted murderer saying, yeah, I committed all of those murders except for one, and the college student begins to investigate. I've heard it's pretty good, and I'm pretty excited to give it a read, and there's also a movie, so probably gonna watch that after reading this. Another highly praised and well-regarded author among Japanese natives is Natsume Soseki. I bought these because they were very highly rated amongst Japanese natives as well as advanced learners of the Japanese language. Botchan, one of his shorter novels, and I actually tried reading this on stream. It took me about 30 minutes to get through the first page, or at least half of it. The book's about a guy from Tokyo who decides to move out to Shikoku and start teaching at a junior high school after both his parents pass away. Another well-rated book by Natsume Soseki is Sanshiro. This book's about an awkward young man who moves out to Tokyo for university, and it talks about how his awkward self deals with the woman of Tokyo, the university, as well as just the real world. Another highly regarded book, even among English speakers, is Wagahai wa Neko de Aru, and it is basically just a cat mocking the stupidity of humanity through modernizing Japan. Looking forward to reading that one as well. And lastly, we have Kokoro. Now, while doing some research, this book in particular caught my eye as a commenter said that it talks about feelings of depression, guilt, loneliness, as well as searching for human connection, and it takes place in the Meiji to Taisho era. So looking forward to getting this one, as well as all of these under my belt at some point in the future, maybe in the next 2 years, hopefully. Just a reminder to not let difficulty stop you. If you're genuinely interested in reading a material, then do it. Just take it bit by bit and be consistent. Doing anything will tire you out eventually. Advanced learners and even native speakers have to close their books for the day at some point. If you have any reading recommendations for me or other commenters, feel free to drop one below. And if you found this video useful, I always appreciate a thumbs up. Thank you so much to these wonderful people for supporting my channel. If you want to connect with me and other motivated Japanese learners, there's a Discord link in the description. So keep learning, keep reading, and keep grinding. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.